longer. The next question for the Fever then becomes Sophie Cunningham, because we were wondering who they would actually protect in the expansion draft. Because Michaela Timpson wasn't selected, I'm going to guess she was protected. So they took the risk, and this is me speculating, of leaving Sophie Cunningham unprotected. But you never thought the Tempo or Fire would take her, because that would require giving her a Supermax contract, and they can only get one unrestricted free agent. So I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same, because they have to decide what her future looks like with the Fever or not in free agency. So all of that is...
The locker room doors slammed shut, and the silence in the facility was heavier than any loss they suffered on the court this year. Stephanie White looked at the final expansion draft list and realized her worst nightmare had come true. Khloe Bby was gone. Christy Wallace was out. And the roster she spent all season building was being picked apart like scavengers at a feast. This wasn't just a routine draft, it was a systematic dismantling of the Indiana Fever's depth. Caitlyn Clark stood there, watching the names disappear from the whiteboard, realizing the teammates who fought beside her were suddenly her rivals. The plan was to grow together, but in one afternoon, the foundation was cracked wide open.
All of that is things to get to. Let's start with the, what I mentioned, the goodbyes. Thank you, Christy Wallace, for the Caitlyn Clark comment. If you recall, Wallace started for a bunch of Caitlyn Clark's rookie year, and I was one of the people like, get her out of the starting lineup, So hopefully she can, continue to grow in her career and played overseas and all that, but obviously didn't contribute at all last year and had a rough year the year prior. Then there's Bibby, who showed some flashes with the Fever, again, because she could shoot the rock, and they don't have that prototypical stretch four, so that's a position they could still fill. I think when you get...
It all started when the Portland Fire and Toronto Tempo released their final selections. Everyone expected a few bench players to move, but losing Khloe Bby was a dagger to the heart of the Fever's offensive scheme. Bby wasn't just another body on the floor. She was that rare stretch four who could spread the defense and give Caitlyn Clark the space she needs to operate. Her ability to shoot the rock from deep made her a nightmare matchup, and Stephanie White knew it. Without Bby, that prototypical stretch position is a gaping hole that most teams would spend years trying to fill. Now, that hole is wide open, and the options to fix it are dwindling fast.
That's a terrible blow for the Fever going forward. Now they can focus on the free agency, like I mentioned. Kelsey Mitchell, priority number one, likely to be cored, but I could see the argument for just extending her long-term and figuring that out now, but they have the advantage of being able to core her on the Supermax. Aaliyah Boston under contract, but set for a raise. They can figure that out. Caitlyn Clark's rookie scale goes up, but still under contract. Timpson, the only other player under contract, and I'm guessing she was protected, like I said, because it would be such a high upside, low risk move to take her in the expansion draft because she's on a rookie deal, and because she.
The move to lose Bby feels even worse when you consider her trajectory before the injury. She was showing massive flashes of brilliance in the middle of the year, proving she could be a long-term piece of this championship puzzle. But the expansion draft is a cruel mistress, and Indiana took a gamble that didn't pay off. They hoped her late-season injury would scare off the new teams, but Toronto saw the value that Indiana tried to hide. It's a massive blow to the rotation because you can't just go out and buy that kind of chemistry in free agency. Stephanie White is now staring at a depth chart that looks dangerously thin at the forward position.
Advantage they have. They have an advantage of Boston and Clark being under contract. They have the advantage of being able to core Kelsey Mitchell, and they have the advantage of Lexi Hull being a restricted free agent, so they can match any offer she receives. Then you start to work around the margins, what's left on the salary cap. I think, Cunningham fits the team. Her shooting, her toughness, her personality, all fit the team. Obviously, her star power has gone up being next to Caitlyn Clark and playing on Indiana. So all things being close to equal, I'm assuming she's inclined to come back. She's made it very clear, in fact, that is the case. But sometimes...
Then there is the Christy Wallace situation, which has been a brewing storm for months. Wallace started the season as one of Caitlyn Clark's primary backcourt partners, but things soured quickly as the season progressed. There were whispers about chemistry issues and comments made behind closed doors that suggested Wallace wasn't happy with her changing role. When she was left unprotected, it felt like a mutual parting of ways, but the optics are still terrible for a team trying to build a culture of winning. Losing a veteran who knows the system is never easy, especially when it leaves your superstar point guard with one less familiar face in the huddle.
Power has gone up being next to Caitlyn Clark and playing on Indiana. So all things being close to equal, I'm assuming she's inclined to come back. She's made it very clear, in fact, that is the case. But sometimes these things can come down to a monetary situation. And basically what it will likely come down to is how much is left for the Fever salary cap, who else they see out on the market that could really help the team, and then how much of a raise they can give Sophie relative to what she could get offered by another team who could make a splash signing her. But all indications are, I think, that the Fever...
People are calling it a clean house strategy, but it feels more like a forced evacuation. Wallace didn't contribute much on the stat sheet last year, but she was a presence in the locker room during the early struggles. Her exit marks the end of an era that barely even started, and it sends a message to the rest of the league that the Fever are willing to cut ties with anyone who doesn't fit the new Clark-centric mold. But you have to wonder if they are cutting too deep, too fast. If you remove all the support beams, the whole roof might come crashing down on the franchise player before the next season even tips off.
Are looking to run it back for the most part with some small additions. So I would think that the changes would be more cosmetic than complete overhauls, but you never know. And until that is done, I think Sophie's probably the biggest looming question for the Fever. As far as the rosters for the Tempo and the Fire go, here you go. Here are the selections from the Tempo, who went a little bit more vet heavy. Lexi Held is an interesting pick, I think, that could really pan out for them. Marina Mabrey, she is, for such a good player, she's obviously moved around a lot in the W.
But the real headline, the one that has Stephanie White losing her cool, is the Sophie Cunningham situation. The decision to leave Sophie unprotected was the biggest gamble in the history of this front office. It was a high-stakes game of poker, where they bet that no one would take her because of her contract demands. They thought they were being clever, playing the system to protect younger assets like Michaela Timpson. But when you leave a star like Sophie on the table, you're playing with fire. Now, the aftermath of that decision is threatening to burn the entire offseason down before the first free agency meeting even happens.
Cunningham, the biggest name overall selected, like I said, probably is Marina Mabrey, going to the Tempo, fresh off the big unrivaled game in Philadelphia, and having played for the Sky and the Sun, and now headed over to that inaugural season in Toronto. But there are two brand new WNBA teams, and now we head off into free agency, where teams are going to have decisions to make. Now, I don't think there will be that much movement amongst the biggest stars, by the way. That's why, like, a Cunningham focus makes sense, because those are the players more likely to move. That level
Sophie
of
Cunningham
player
isn't just a player, she's an identity. Her toughness, her shooting, and her massive personality are exactly what Caitlyn Clark needs to stay protected on the court. But now, reports are surfacing that Sophie's refusal to commit long-term is leaving the Fever in a state of absolute panic. She has the leverage now, and she knows it. The star power she gained by playing alongside Clark has skyrocketed her market value to levels the Fever might not be able to match. If she walks away in free agency, it won't just be a roster spot lost, it will be the heart and soul of the team's grit walking out the door.
Level of player, versus we've already seen Brianna Stewart say, I'm going back to the Liberty. We've already seen Sabrina Ionescu say, I'm going back to the Liberty. We've already seen Asia Wilson say, I'm going back to the Aces. So despite like 100 plus whatever free agents, I don't think the biggest names are going to move. I think the moves that get made that are going to determine the differences between these teams will be made on the margins.
Imagine the pressure on Stephanie White right now. She's trying to recruit top-tier talent while her own veterans are looking at the exit signs. Sophie has made it clear in the past that she likes Indiana, but money talks louder than loyalty in the WNBA's new era. If another team offers her a splash deal that the Fever can't match because of their salary cap constraints, she's gone. This leaves Caitlyn Clark virtually alone in terms of veteran leadership she can actually trust. The chemistry they built was the only thing keeping the team afloat during the hard times, and now, that bridge is being dismantled piece by piece. The numbers simply don't add up for Indiana right now. They have to prioritize Kelsey Mitchell, who is priority number 1 for a Supermax extension. Then you have Aaliyah Boston coming up for a massive raise, and Caitlyn Clark's rookie scale is already ticking upward. By the time you get to the margins where Sophie Cunningham lives, the cupboard might be bare. Stephanie White is reportedly furious because she was promised a roster that could compete for a title, not a roster that has to beg its own players to stay. Every dollar spent on one player is a dollar taken away from the support system Clark desperately needs to thrive. This refusal from the veteran core to take team-friendly deals is creating a massive rift. You can't blame the players for wanting their fair market value, especially with the league's popularity exploding, but for the Fever, it's a logistical nightmare. If Sophie Cunningham decides to take a massive offer from a team like the Toronto Tempo, who are looking for a face of the franchise, the Fever have no way to stop her. They didn't core her, and they didn't protect her, they left her out in the cold, and now she might just decide to stay there. It's a massive failure of asset management that could haunt this team for years, and let's talk about the impact on Caitlyn Clark. She is the most scrutinized athlete in the world right now, and she's being left to fend for herself. Without BBY to stretch the floor, and without Sophie to provide that veteran enforcer energy, Clark is going to be facing double teams and physical play without any backup. It's one thing to be a superstar, it's another thing to be a target. Stephanie White knows that if Clark gets frustrated, or, heaven forbid, injured because the roster is too weak, the entire Indiana experiment fails. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the current trajectory is looking incredibly grim. The expansion draft results for the other teams only rub salt in the wound. Toronto Tempo went heavy on veterans, snagging Marina Mabrey in a move that shocked the league. Mabrey is exactly the kind of player Indiana needs, but instead, she's heading north to lead a brand new franchise. Meanwhile, the Portland Fire are scooping up young talent with high upside like Nika Mull. It feels like every other team in the league is getting stronger, while the Fever are just trying to hold on to what they already had. The gap between the contenders and the Fever is widening, and the offseason has barely even begun. Stephanie White's frustration isn't just about the players lost, it's about the strategy itself. There's a theory that they protected Michaela Timpson because she's on a cheap rookie deal with high upside. While that makes sense on a spreadsheet, it doesn't help you win games in May. You don't win championships with potential, you win them with established stars who can hit big shots under pressure. By prioritizing a low-risk move like protecting Timpson over a high-impact move like securing Sophie, the front office might have just signaled that they aren't ready to go all in on a championship run just yet. What happens if Kelsey Mitchell looks at this chaos and decides she wants out, too? She is a restricted free agent, meaning the Fever can match any offer, but do you really want a star player who feels like she's trapped on a sinking ship? If the veteran support system disappears, the pressure on Mitchell and Clark becomes unsustainable. We saw flashes of what this team could be when everyone was clicking, but that version of the Fever feels like a lifetime ago now. The run-it-back plan is starting to look more like a start-from-scratch plan, and that is not what the fans signed up for. There's also the Lexi Hull factor. She's a restricted free agent, which is one of the few advantages Indiana still has. They can match any offer she gets, but even that comes with a price tag. Every player they save takes a chunk out of the cap space needed to bring in new talent. It's a zero-sum game. If they pay Lexi and Kelsey what they're worth, there is almost nothing left for a stretch four or a backup point guard. The team is essentially boxed into a corner, where they have to hope their young players take a massive leap forward because they literally cannot afford to bring in outside help. The reality is that the Fever proved last year they could find talent in the margins. Players like Erica Wheeler and Odyssey Sims came in on hardship contracts and actually contributed, but you can't build a dynasty on hardship contracts and temporary fixes. You need a stable core. With BBY gone and Sophie's future in doubt, that stable core is down to just 3 people. That's not a team, that's a starting lineup with no bench. Stephanie White is reportedly looking at international scouting in the upcoming draft to find a miracle, but those players rarely contribute at a high level in their first year. The Sophie refusal narrative is gaining steam because she's been so vocal about her value. She knows her star power has gone up exponentially since she started playing next to Caitlyn Clark. She's not just a basketball player anymore, she's a brand, and she wants to be paid like one. If Indiana won't give her the raise she's looking for, there are 10 other teams that will gladly pay for the Caitlyn Clark effect that Sophie brings with her. It's a cold, hard business move that is leaving the Fever coaching staff in a state of absolute disbelief as they watch their roster crumble. Even the small additions the team is planning feel like cosmetic changes rather than complete overhauls, but a cosmetic change isn't going to stop a powerhouse like the New York Liberty or the Las Vegas Aces. Those teams are keeping their stars together and adding pieces. Meanwhile, Indiana is losing depth players who were vital to their late-season surge. It's like trying to win a race while your pit crew is busy selling off parts of your car to the highest bidder. Stephanie White is left holding the steering wheel, wondering how she's supposed to compete without any tires. Let's look at the hidden cost of losing Khloe Bby. She was a bridge player, someone who could play multiple positions and fill in the gaps when the stars were resting. Without her, the rotation becomes rigid and predictable. Opposing coaches are already licking their chops at the prospect of a Fever team that has no versatility. If you can't throw different looks at a defense, you're dead in the water in the WNBA. The exit of BBY isn't just a loss of points, it's a loss of tactical options that Stephanie White used to keep opponents off balance all season long, and then there's the psychological toll. Caitlyn Clark is a winner, she wants to be surrounded by people who are as committed to the goal as she is. When she sees her teammates leaving for expansion teams or holding out for more money, it has to weigh on her. She's the face of the league, carrying the weight of an entire sport on her shoulders, and her own front office can't seem to keep her teammates in the building. It's a recipe for disaster that could lead to the kind of superstar frustration we've seen ruin franchises in other leagues. The clock is ticking, and the silence is deafening. We've seen stars like Breanna Stewart and Aya Wilson commit to their teams early, providing stability and allowing their front offices to plan. The fact that Indiana doesn't have that same level of commitment from its veteran core is a massive red flag. It suggests that there is something wrong with the culture or the financial outlook that we aren't seeing on the surface. Stephanie White is caught in the middle of a power struggle between a front office trying to be efficient and players who know their worth in a booming market, and right now, the players are winning the tug-of-war. The next few weeks will determine the future of the Indiana Fever for the next decade. If they can't convince Sophie Cunningham to stay, and if they can't find a suitable replacement for Khloe Bby, the 2025 season is over before it even starts. They will be a one-woman show in a league that requires a full ensemble cast to succeed. Stephanie White is reportedly working overtime to fix the damage, but some wounds are too deep to be patched up with a few free agent signings. The refusal of the veterans to fall in line is the ultimate test of her coaching career. At the end of the day, the Indiana Fever are at a crossroads. They have the greatest young talent the game has ever seen in Caitlyn Clark, but they are surrounding her with uncertainty and exits. The expansion draft was supposed to be a minor hurdle, but it has turned into a full-blown roster crisis. If the front office doesn't wake up and realize that you can't leave your superstar alone on an island, they are going to waste the prime years of a generational talent. The world is watching, the fans are waiting.